At my sister's wedding, she told her new husband, "Sabrina works a desk job. She wouldn't understand your soldier stories," while I wore my major's uniform. Her father-in-law overheard and everything changed in an instant. The moment General Michael Prescott's eyes locked onto mine, I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with high-stakes situations. 20 years of military training had taught me to recognize pivotal moments, and this was one of them. My sister Genevieve had just publicly dismissed my military service in front of a retired 2-star general who clearly recognized the significance of my rank insignia. The gold oak leaf on my dress blues represented years of sacrifice, countless deployments and expertise that Genevieve had spent decades minimizing to our family. I watched the general's expression shift from polite interest to sharp focus as he processed what he was seeing. Robert, my sister's new husband and a captain in the Army, had gone completely rigid beside Genevieve. His face displayed the unmistakable look of a junior officer who had just witnessed his civilian wife publicly disrespect a senior field grade officer. In military culture, this wasn't just awkward. It was a fundamental breach of protocol that revealed either ignorance or deliberate disrespect. My mind immediately began calculating the implications. This wasn't just about correcting a misconception anymore. This moment represented the collision of two worlds: the carefully constructed family narrative where I was the disappointing daughter who had chosen a dead-end career, and the professional reality where I was Major Sabrina Steele, Judge Advocate General's Corps, with a reputation that apparently preceded me even into civilian social circles. I realized I had multiple strategic advantages converging simultaneously. First, I possessed the moral authority of truth. My actual military record spoke for itself. Second, I had the respect of the most influential person at this gathering, a retired general whose opinion carried weight. Third, my sister had just revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of my life and career in front of witnesses who could immediately recognize her error. Fourth, I maintained my professional composure while she was beginning to show visible confusion and embarrassment. The strategic pause I took wasn't hesitation, it was assessment. I needed to determine how to handle this revelation in a way that would permanently shift the family dynamic while maintaining my professional integrity. This wasn't about revenge, it was about correction. For too long, my family had minimized my achievements while elevating Genevieve's comparatively modest successes. Tonight, the truth would establish the actual hierarchy of our accomplishments. My background had prepared me for exactly this kind of complex situation where multiple stakeholders, conflicting interests, and public perception all converged. As a JAG officer, I had spent years navigating political sensitivities while upholding legal principles. I had prosecuted cases that made headlines, advised commanding generals on legal interpretations that affected international relations, and represented the Army's interests in congressional hearings. My expertise wasn't theoretical. It was battle-tested in some of the most complex legal environments imaginable. The professional foundation I had built was unshakable. I had graduated top of my class from Georgetown Law while simultaneously completing my military obligations. My first deployment to Iraq as a captain had resulted in successfully prosecuting a major procurement fraud case that saved the Army millions of dollars and established new precedents for contractor accountability. That case had been featured in Military Law Review and was now required reading at the Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School. My financial position reflected years of disciplined military pay, deployment savings, and strategic investments. Unlike my sister, who had inherited our father's architectural firm through family manipulation, I had built my wealth independently. My military salary as a major was $87,000 annually, but deployment pay, hazard pay, and careful investing had grown my portfolio to nearly $400,000. I owned my home outright, had no debt, and maintained security clearances that made me highly valuable in the civilian legal market whenever I chose to transition. The strategic advantages I possessed over Genevieve were numerous and decisive. First, I had actual expertise in high-stakes legal matters, while she managed a small architectural firm in a limited regional market. Second, I had developed professional relationships with flag officers, federal judges, and senior government officials, while her network consisted primarily of local business contacts and social acquaintances. Third, I had proven myself in genuinely challenging environments, while her accomplishments existed within the protected sphere of inherited family business. Fourth, I maintained impeccable professional credentials that were publicly verifiable, while her success depended heavily on the family reputation and inherited client base. Fifth, I had built my career on merit and performance, while she had benefited from family favoritism and our father's influence during his lifetime. The contrast between our actual achievements was stark, and tonight it would become undeniable. My preparation for confronting family misconceptions had been ongoing for years. I had maintained detailed records of my service accomplishments not out of ego, but because military culture demanded documentation. I had copies of commendations, performance evaluations, and case summaries that quantified my professional impact. I had cultivated relationships with senior military officials who respected my work and would provide references that carried weight far beyond anything Genevieve could access. The documentation of my actual career was extensive and impressive. I had been the lead prosecutor in the Fort Hood consolidated fraud cases that resulted in $12 million in recovered funds and precedent-setting legal victories. My legal briefs had been cited by the Supreme Court in military justice cases. I had served as legal advisor to a commanding general during counterterrorism operations that required real-time legal decisions affecting national security. These weren't administrative accomplishments. They were substantive contributions to military justice and national defense. General Prescott stepped closer to our table, his experienced eyes taking inventory of my uniform, my ribbons, and my bearing. "Major Steele?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of decades in command. "The Sabrina Steele who handled the Bram contracting fraud case?" I rose to my feet with the precise movements that came from years of military protocol. "Yes, sir," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. This was my element now. Professional military interaction where my expertise and experience were immediately apparent and respected. His stern expression transformed into one of genuine respect. "Major, it is an honor to meet you. Your legal brief on that case was a masterpiece of military jurisprudence. It's required reading at the War College now. You set new precedents that strengthened our ability to combat contractor fraud." Behind me, I heard Genevieve make a small, choking sound. She was beginning to understand that her carefully maintained narrative about my insignificant desk job was crumbling in real time. Robert was staring at me with a mixture of professional respect and personal mortification. He had just realized his wife had publicly dismissed a superior officer whose legal work he had literally studied. The ripple effects began immediately. My mother, seated at the adjacent table, had frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. The great aunt I'd been seated with was staring at me with newfound interest. Other guests who had overheard the general's comments were turning their attention to our corner of the ballroom, the carefully orchestrated seating arrangement that had relegated me to the misfit table suddenly looked like deliberate disrespect rather than natural family dynamics. I seized the strategic initiative with calculated precision. "General Prescott, thank you for your kind words. The Bram case was particularly complex because it required coordinating with multiple federal agencies while maintaining operational security. We recovered $12 million in fraudulent billings and established protocols that prevented similar schemes across 3 theater commands." Genevieve's face had gone pale. She was hearing specific details about my work that contradicted everything she had told people about my career. More importantly, she was hearing these details from a retired general who clearly considered my work significant enough to be familiar with specific cases and their outcomes. The Fort Hood cases were equally challenging, I continued, knowing that Robert would recognize the reference. Coordinating with civilian prosecutors while maintaining military justice standards required developing new interagency protocols that are now standard throughout the JAG Corps. Robert stepped forward, his military bearing now fully engaged. Ma'am, I studied those cases at the Command and General Staff College. Your legal arguments were brilliant. You managed to establish contractor accountability without compromising operational flexibility. The professional recognition from both father and son was creating a stark contrast with Genevieve's earlier dismissal. She was beginning to understand that not only had she misrepresented my career, but she had done so in front of people who could immediately recognize her error and evaluate the actual significance of my professional accomplishments. I turned to address my sister directly, maintaining the calm, professional tone that had served me well in countless high-pressure situations. Genevieve, I understand there may have been some confusion about my work. I am a major in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. I prosecute war crimes, advise commanding generals on international law, and handle complex legal matters affecting national security. My desk job has taken me to courtrooms in Baghdad, briefing rooms at the Pentagon, and negotiation tables at The Hague. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person within hearing range was processing the complete reversal of everything they had been told about the family dynamic. Genevieve, who had positioned herself as the successful daughter, was being revealed as someone who fundamentally misunderstood her own sister's career and accomplishments. My mother finally found her voice. Sabrina, we didn't realize. We knew you were in the Army, but... She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. The truth was becoming clear to everyone. They hadn't bothered to learn the actual details of my career because it was easier to maintain their simplified narrative. General Prescott was now studying the ribbons on my uniform with professional interest. Major, I see you have the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Joint Service Commendation Medal. He paused, recognizing the significance of what he was seeing. This represents distinguished service over multiple deployments and commands. Each ribbon he identified was another piece of evidence contradicting the family narrative. The Bronze Star Medal was awarded for heroic or meritorious achievement in combat operations. The multiple meritorious service medals indicated sustained superior performance in positions of significant responsibility. These weren't administrative awards. They represented recognition of exceptional military service that required both competence and courage. The consequences were escalating beyond simple embarrassment. Genevieve was realizing that her wedding guests were witnessing the complete collapse of her carefully constructed family story. More significantly, her new husband and father-in-law were discovering that she had either been deliberately deceptive about her sister's career or was genuinely ignorant of basic facts about her own family members' professional accomplishments. Robert was looking at his new wife with an expression I recognized from military contexts, the look of someone reassessing their judgment about a person's credibility and character. In military culture, accurately understanding and respecting rank and service was fundamental. Genevieve's dismissal of my career wasn't just wrong. It revealed either willful ignorance or deliberate disrespect for military service. I decided to provide specific examples that would cement the professional contrast. General, you might also be interested to know that I recently completed a fellowship at the International Criminal Court, working on war crimes prosecution guidelines that will affect NATO operations. The legal framework we developed has been adopted by 7 allied nations. This detail served multiple purposes. It demonstrated that my expertise was recognized internationally, not just within the U.S. military. It showed that I worked at the highest levels of military legal affairs. Most importantly, it provided concrete evidence that my career had produced meaningful, lasting contributions to military law and international security. Genevieve made her final attempt to maintain some version of her narrative. "But Sabrina, you never told us about any of this. How are we supposed to know?" I turned to face her directly, maintaining my professional composure while delivering the strategic response I had been preparing for years. "Genevieve, I sent you copies of every promotion certificate, every commendation, every significant case summary. I called after every major deployment. I invited you to my promotion ceremonies. The information was always available. You chose not to engage with it because it didn't fit the story you preferred to tell." This response was devastating because it was verifiable. I had maintained detailed records of every attempt to share my professional accomplishments with family members. The evidence would show that their ignorance was willful, not accidental. I had given them multiple opportunities to understand and acknowledge my actual career, but they had consistently chosen to maintain their simplified narrative. The broader implications were becoming apparent to everyone present. This wasn't just about one misunderstanding at a wedding. This was about years of family dynamics where my genuine achievements had been consistently minimized, while Genevieve's more modest accomplishments had been celebrated and elevated. The contrast was now undeniable and public. General Prescott addressed Genevieve directly, his tone carrying the authority of decades in command. "Ma'am, your sister has served our nation with distinction in some of the most challenging legal environments imaginable. Her work has quite literally shaped military policy and saved lives through improved legal frameworks. This represents the kind of service that deserves recognition and respect, particularly from family members." The general's intervention was significant beyond the immediate moment. He was using his authority and credibility to establish the proper perspective on my military service. Coming from someone of his stature, this wasn't just opinion. It was an authoritative assessment that would be difficult for anyone present to dismiss or contradict. My mother attempted to recover the situation. "Of course, we're proud of Sabrina's service. We just didn't understand the details." But her explanation sounded hollow even to her. The evidence was overwhelming that they had actively chosen ignorance about my career while remaining deeply informed about every aspect of Genevieve's professional and personal life. The evening's power dynamic had shifted completely and irreversibly. I was no longer the forgotten sister relegated to the corner table. I was Major Sabrina Steele, whose professional accomplishments commanded respect from the most distinguished military officer present. Genevieve was no longer the unquestioned family success story. She was someone who had revealed her fundamental ignorance about her own sister's distinguished military career. Robert was now looking at me with the professional respect due to a senior officer, while regarding his new wife with visible confusion about how she could have been so wrong about something so fundamental. The marriage that had begun the evening as a celebration of Genevieve's success was now shadowed by questions about her judgment and character. I decided to conclude the interaction with grace while cementing the new understanding. "General Prescott, Captain Prescott, it has been an honor to meet you both. Genevieve, I hope this helps clarify any confusion about my career. I wish you both happiness in your marriage." The professional courtesy of my closing statement provided a sharp contrast to the dismissive treatment I had received earlier. I was demonstrating the kind of character and grace that military service develops, while highlighting the difference between my professional bearing and the family dynamics that had diminished my actual accomplishments. As I prepared to leave the reception, the consequences of the evening's revelations were still unfolding. Genevieve's perfect wedding had become the setting for the complete collapse of her family narrative. Her new husband and father-in-law had discovered that she was either deceptive or ignorant about basic facts concerning her own sister's distinguished military career. The respect and authority I had earned through years of service were now acknowledged by the people whose opinions mattered most in this context. 6 months later, The impact of that evening continued to reverberate through our family relationships. My mother began reaching out regularly, asking detailed questions about my work and expressing genuine interest in my career for the first time. She had realized that her dismissive attitude toward my military service reflected poorly on her judgment and values. Genevieve's marriage to Robert became increasingly strained as he processed the implications of her treatment of military service and family relationships. General Prescott became a valuable professional contact, introducing me to other senior military officials and federal judges who respected my legal expertise. Robert eventually reached out to apologize personally and to express his respect for my service, acknowledging that the evening had opened his eyes to family dynamics he hadn't understood. My career benefited significantly from the enhanced recognition and new professional relationships, with 2 federal judges offering me positions in their chambers and a major Washington law firm extending an offer for a senior associate position specializing in government contracts and military law. Most importantly, I no longer carried the burden of family misunderstanding about my life's work, having successfully transformed a moment of public dismissal into complete vindication of my professional accomplishments and personal character.